All right. So I'm Dr. Mary Lou Marcillo. Today in the series, Her Stories, 100 Women's Voices, we have with us the great Sara Peña, who is the director of the New Jersey Department of State Center for Hispanic Policy, Research, and Development. That is a mouthful. But before we get started, I want to just give some information as to why I made the decision to do this series. So there were two reasons. The first one was a couple of weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal, there was an op-ed chiding our future First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, that she shouldn't use her title of doctor because, after all, she's not a medical doctor. And also because the most important role that she's going to serve is that of First Lady and wife to the President Joe Biden. And I thought, wow, in 2021, we still have men who think that they can tell us our place and the titles that we should use. And I thought, no, that's not a good idea. So I made the decision to do this series to kind of counter that, to try to give voice to all these women who are really doing extraordinary things with their ordinary lives that oftentimes no one knows about. And the second reason is because my mom passed away about 10 years ago. And it's only recently, I would say in the last 2-3 years, that I've really begun to understand how complex my mother was, the things that she experienced when she was in her 20s and her 30s, and ultimately that led to her becoming the woman she became and the mother she became. And I wish I had had the opportunity, the wisdom at the time to have asked her these questions so that I could better understand who she was. And so this is the other reason I made the decision to do this series, to honor my mom. So I do have the pleasure of speaking today with Sara Peña, and she and I share something in common. She's half Ecuadorian, I'm 100% Ecuadorian, but together we're Ecuadorian. So there we go. All right, Sara, so let's get started. So tell me, where did you grow up and what was that like?
Wow. I grew up in this little town. No, just kidding. Newark, New Jersey. Definitely not a little town here in the state of New Jersey. I grew up there. I was born, raised, went to public school there. It was very challenging, as you know, for many of you that are familiar with Newark. It's an urban community, very limited resources, especially during the time that I was growing up. And it was very challenging. You know, there wasn't that equality in education. You know, there wasn't that, all these other resources that we see today for especially immigrant families that don't speak the language in this country. So that was a real challenge for us. My mom migrated to this country from Ecuador on an adventure, right? She just wanted to adventure, and, her family was very well off in Ecuador, but, her daddy said, "Where do you want to go?" And she said, "I want to go to the United States." Dress. So it was
How
like,
old was she?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How old was she when she came?
In her mid-20s.
Okay.
Mid-20s.
So she had gone to college in Ecuador?
She only went to high school.
Okay.
So she, from what I hear, because I'm always asking these questions about, as I was growing up, I always wanted to know, and I was always very curious. So I would ask her, and she said, I went to high school. My dad wanted me to continue studying, but that really wasn't for me. She was really into arts and craft, like knitting and making things. And she really loved that. She's one of 7. And so, her brothers were engineers, dentists, everybody had a field.
Right.
He was kind of like, he said, "Well, listen, I'm going to get you what they call a bodega or store. Here's a store, go manage it, do something like that." They were, they had this big business in the town that they were in. They were very well off and so forth. So like I said, she came to this country just kind of like seeking an adventure, loved the United States of America, stayed with a friend of hers who was already here, and met my father, who comes from Dominican Republic. And they fell in love, and quickly, as you can imagine, got married on December 24th.
No way, Christmas
Every
Eve?
year, because they have a picture that has a clock behind them in City Hall, and it says 11:30. So my father, every year, December 24th at 11:30, we have to call them.
Oh my God.
So they're so cute, but they came to this country, not knowing the language, coming from 2 different worlds. My dad came here because out of necessity, wanting a better life for himself, for his mom. He was providing for his mom in the country. He was very poor. He came from extremely poor background, living.
How old was he, Sara, when he came?
He was, I want to say, he told me he was like 18 to 20, around there, very young. came through, Mexico, and, but he made it an adventure too, which is beautiful because he has like a little bit of pictures that I look back on.
Mhm.
And he didn't finish elementary school.
Wow.
He didn't know how to really read that much, and he taught himself. I see my father as one of the most intelligent men that I have ever met in my life. He taught himself how to read. He loves to read. He put that on us at an early age, how important knowledge was to defend ourselves in this country. And so his story to get to the United States and then how he met my mom, is totally different than how my mom came. So I thought that was really,
Yeah, they came from two very diverse backgrounds because she was much more affluent, he was much poorer. It's surprising that they ended up becoming a couple, because class becomes really important. I mean, there's a real strong class system all over Latin America. So I'm surprised that they actually, when they met, that they decided to date and subsequently get married.
Well, my mom was hesitant. She gave him a fake name. I mean, this whole story goes back. She was like, my father will never approve, kind of thing. So, I mean, there were their own challenges, but, my mom kind of like kept it under wraps for a little bit, I believe, and then they loved that.
Sarah, also, was there an issue of color because your mother, I'm assuming, was very fair and your father was not so fair? And that's also big in Latin America, the whole colorism thing.
Yeah.
Good hair, bad hair, dark skin, light skin. There's like a whole issue with all of that stuff.
That's a really great point, Marilu, because I think that they don't tell me that part. Like my mom doesn't maybe share that part, but because of me, when they met me, I realized that there must have been that going on. My mom just didn't maybe want to talk about it, but they were like shocked to see my hair. They call me Sambita,
I got that name too. That's my name.
Right. And so I was like, what does that mean? I was very young. I was like 14, 15. And there were other things that happened that I was like, oh, do they like me? Like, so it was very challenging and seeing that. But, eventually my cousins, and it was different with my cousins, but the older generation was very like that. So I'm sure they experienced a little bit. And my father's name is Hercules. And so for my mother to tell her dad, mi esposo se llama Hércules. I mean, how unbelievable, whose name is Hercules? It's hilarious. We have a lot of good times laughing about the story. So I love to listen to their stories, especially my dad. My grandmother named him Hercules because she had such a difficult pregnancy. At that time, my grandfather was like not along with the regime, the political, which he was a political refugee or political, just not along with politics.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And they had to.
Was it Trujillo at the time?
Yeah.
Trujillo was a terrible dictator.
So they were kind of like against it. So they had to live like in really like country, and they were from the country, but they had to go like mountains, like very close to Haiti, the border with Haiti. I mean, these are the stories that I've heard. I don't want to say anything misinforming, but these are the stories that I've heard. And so because she has such a difficult pregnancy, my grandfather told her, if this child is born, se tiene que llamar Hércules, because un hombre, Hercules, the Greek god, and so forth. And so, yeah,
that's amazing. I love that story. So now here you are, right? The child of two parents who are from different parts of Latin America. We're talking about issues of class, issues of color, because those things are really important in Latin America. I mean, we tend to be very racist, unfortunately, and those issues do come up sometimes in families, right? And you grew up in Newark, which at the time had already gone through the riots, the riots in the 1960s and 50s, 60s, that they had those riots, and Newark had changed completely as a result of that. Which is unfortunate because Newark used to be a really beautiful place and it was a community. There wasn't all these broken down buildings, burnt out lots and so forth. So you were growing up after the great riots in Newark. And so it was a challenging place to grow up in. And clearly your mom and dad didn't go to college. So what was the motivation to go to college for you?
There was no motivation. Plan was You go to high school, you get a job, and you help out at the house. That was the plan. It was explained early on. That's the plan. You have to always help your house. You had a job, you had to give to the house. Anything was to the house. So as I grew up in Newark in a neighborhood that was predominantly African-American and Puerto Rican, we had little sprinkles of us or Central America, but it wasn't as dominating as the Puerto Rican community that was growing, that was largely in New Jersey in general, but also in the city of Newark and African-American. And so that was really the culture that we grew up in as it came to music for me. You know, as it came to music, as it came to foods. My mom, like I said, came from different class. So when she got to the United States, she didn't know how to cook. So she didn't know how to cook a ceviche.
Right. Yeah, because if you're in a wealthy family in Ecuador, you have help. You have people who take care of everything. Food, they do your laundry, everything is taken care of. So I could understand why she didn't know how to.
She was la niña, right? La niña Sarita, right? And so sometimes when we used to go to Ecuador and these women would say, oh, niña Sarita, I'm like, you know, what is, so that's how I started asking questions. Because otherwise I would never have, my mother never, ever told me any of it until I actually went to Ecuador and heard some background. I was like, okay, she never told us anything. And so anything like that, you know, that where she was well off and things. So my mom learned to cook dishes from her very dear friend that she met here, who was Puerto Rican. And so she learned Puerto Rican dishes, you know, and so beans, habichuela, esto, you know, and little bit things to cook like that. And that's how so that's where we ate at home. And so when people saw me as I got older, hey, you know all these dishes. I'm like, no, not really. Even mango, I didn't know, you know, we didn't eat. But anyways, back to where I was raised, like I said, it was predominantly African-American, Puerto Rican. So you didn't know you were poor, you know, in the neighborhood, you didn't know you were poor. So everybody just shared everything. The parents were very, you know.
Let me tell you something. Your mother must have really loved your dad, because that is a serious change. Going from being taken care of, having access to everything, not having to worry about money, living in a world where everything is done for her, to coming to marry someone where she's literally doing everything plus raising kids. And did she work outside the house as well, or just was she at home?
So she started working when she got to this country in a factory. Her friend and her cousin put her in, and then she stopped when she met my dad. My dad didn't want her to work, and he wanted her to raise us, my sister and I. And so when we got about 9 years old, she went back to work. Because she needed to. But yeah, you know, I find that so, you know, unique. Like I asked her as I got older. Once again, I'm talking about when I reached my 20s, you know, when I really got curious, like, Mom, why did you stay? What, you know? And I believe it, you know, to me, she says she loved my dad. She loved this country. She just felt free. She felt a sense of freedom here in this country. Whereas back home, she didn't feel that.
Well, yeah, I mean, in Ecuador, there's a lot of restrictions on women, even today, in terms of, you know, what we can and can't do, career choices, educational choices. There's just, you know, if patriarchy exists in the United States, it exists a lot more in Latin America. Mm-hmm. So, you know, so yeah, her life would have been a lot more controlled there.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Even my aunt eventually, also one of her sisters came to live in the United States because of it as well. She was a dentist over there, but it was so, you know, it was different. And so she also came, and she was the only sibling that she had here in this country. She's still, to this day, it's only the two of them.
Wow. That's amazing. So now, how did you decide to go to college? How did that come up? Tell me.
So college, you know, very interesting. Like I said, that wasn't the dynamic, that wasn't the thought process. But when I was in high school, I knew I had to get good grades. And so I just worked hard in getting good grades. And now you don't understand, right? Your parents, they went to open house. My dad worked a lot. My mom went to open houses, but she didn't understand what the teacher was saying. So I was really the mini adult.
That feeling.
Translating, you know, everything to my mom. And so my mom didn't know about college, didn't talk too much to the vecinas about it, didn't have those kind of conversations. everybody was in their own struggles and they were just trying to help women support one another from their husbands. There was a lot of domestic violence going on in the neighborhood. There was a lot of substance abuse going on. So these women really depended on each other.
Right.
For a lot of things that they were going through and with their children. So we didn't have those conversations about the future. What did this look like for Sara? So as I went into high school, I just kind of went with the flow for the years. And then I had like work study, went to work, provided for the family. I didn't have a lot of money. You don't make a lot of money in work study, but whatever you made, it helped out. Every little bit counts. And in my senior year in April, so I was graduating in June, and in April, I'm walking, I'll never forget it. It's so vivid still to this day. I was walking by the guidance counselor's office, and my guidance counselor walked out, and she goes, "Hey, Sara, hey, I'm just curious, where are you going to college?" And I looked at her with this face like, "What are you talking about?" And my words to her were, "What is college?" When I think about it today, it's very emotional for me. How can a 16-year-old girl not have known about college? You mean to tell me no teacher, none of her friends, I wasn't, those 4 years were very difficult for me. So I was really focused at home. I wasn't really into school, like extracurricular activities. I just work study. I just did what I had to do to get home. Because when I got home, I had to make sure the beans were done, the rice was done, because mommy was working and daddy was coming home at 5, dinner had to be ready. I had to take care of my sister, I had to do my homework. So there was a lot of stuff at home. So I wasn't really focused on what's happening in high school. So
you were just it was like a checklist, got to get that checked off.
Yeah. And from what I've learned down the road, it's like you're in that survival mode. And I think I've always been in that survival mode. To this day, I have to catch myself. But so the guidance counselor came and asked me that, and I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I said, "What's college?" She goes, "What?" And she was my guidance counselor, shame on her. And then she takes me into her office so that nobody can hear what she's going to, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and blah, blah, blah. And long story short, like I said, I was graduating in June and it was April, and she had gone to a school known now as Kane University. But back then it was Kane College.
Right.
And I know somebody there. I can probably get you in, but you might have to do a summer program. Now I hadn't taken any college courses. I hadn't prepped for college. I don't know what
You didn't even know it existed until like 5 minutes before that.
I mean, we had like 5 white people in high school, in the whole high school. Like, so I was like, okay, all right, if you think it's a good thing, then maybe I should go.
Let me think about this a little bit.
Yeah. And then and she was like, "No, I'm doing it right now." I was like, oh, okay, go ahead, do it. And I go home and tell my mom, and she was furious.
Why was she pissed?
You know what college was. She thought it was like taking them away from her, right? So now I'm being taken away from the home.
She thought it was what? Oh, she thought you were going to go away.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I guess, my mom, I could imagine the scare of being new to this country and to the culture and the way things are, and something new like this, and you don't know about it, you're not familiar, and it's just that fear of your child being without you. You know how many of us have our kids right here tied to our hip. So I think all those fears came into play, and she was very angry. She wasn't supportive. But then I felt like, so college was put in my head. And then I started it's for some reason, when things are put in your head, you start noticing more, right, about it. And I started hearing people, and I started watching, and okay, this college thing, everybody seems to be motivated about it. It sounds good. Maybe it'll help me come back and help my community. And that's what I thought about. I want to help. I remember something had happened at home, and we were outside, and I was sitting in front of a church. And I said, I want one day, God, to come back and help people that are going through what I went through or what I saw my friends go through. And that always stayed with me. So I said, well, maybe I had to do this college thing. Now, Marilu, that was a whole disaster, because I went in the summer for EOF. Everybody there I felt much smarter, had college prep or had something. I didn't qualify financially because I didn't do my financial aid form, right? So now I'm there on $500 Pell Grant, and the rest were loans because I didn't know how to fill out the paperwork. I had nobody to help me, and I was lost.
And thank God it was a state college, that if it had been a private school, the bill would have been bigger.
But, if somebody would have told me earlier, I had good grades, I was an honor roll, maybe I would have got scholarships. If somebody would have told me there was a Rutgers in my backyard, an NJIT in my backyard, I wouldn't have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take 3 buses to Union, New Jersey, and take 3 buses back to go to school for one day and spend money on food and transportation, money that we didn't have. My parents didn't give me money.
Right.
So it was very, very challenging.
I imagine, that there must have been moments that you thought, maybe this isn't for me.
Yes, a lot of moments. But I'll tell you one thing, as I sit here and complain about the bus ride, right? There were 3 buses to go. Now it's easier to get to Kane University, but back then it wasn't. You had to go through Newark, then you had to go through Irvington, then you had to go through, to get you another bus to Union, and you had to go to Elizabeth to get to Union. Like, it was crazy. But you know what kept me? I felt like it's really important who you surround yourself with. I could never say that enough. On that bus ride, there were students so motivated and so happy to go to this Kane College thing. And they, and they were so into this with their book bags and just so happy, oh, I have this class, and I would hear them. And I met a very dear friend, she's still a dear friend of mine, on that bus ride. She would get picked up in East Orange, and we would sit on the bus and we would sing. We would sing songs that we loved, R&B songs that were on the radio, and the people on the bus would laugh at us. But we were all together. I felt like it was a camaraderie, right? We were in this together. They looked like me. They were going to the school. They were on the same, they took maybe 2 buses versus me 3. But we were in this together. And so I think that helped me get, okay, I got to keep doing this because there's something better. They obviously know something I don't. And father keeps telling me I got to read. So there's somebody has the secret, and I got to keep going.
So what did you major in?
Jesus, Lord, and Mary. What didn't I major in? Remember, I'm in school, clueless. I mean, I thought I wanted to be the weather girl. So I studied astronomy, the stars, and I failed the class. I was like, okay, this is clearly not for me. I wanted to be on TV. So I wanted to do, communications, but I didn't know, I still wasn't getting that mentorship that I needed. So I said, you know what, at this point, I was working 3 jobs. I was like a sophomore or junior, working 3 jobs, but been in school for 3 years, but had credits of a freshman or sophomore, because I came in with needing courses. So my courses were really pass or fail until later, a little longer than the rest of
those remedial classes that you had to do, which don't count, but you need in college. Yeah.
So it was very challenging. I mean, I'm just giving you the overall, but I was still kind of lost. And then one year, I was working 3 jobs, and I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I took out so many darn loans. I've been in this school for so long. Everybody's about to graduate another year or 2. What am I doing? And so I fell in love with marketing and management. So I said, you know what? I'm really good in that. I love the classes. So boom, I'm going to major in that. And I had enough credits to major, to kind of declare the major. And that's what I did. I majored in management science, general management science. I said, you know what? I can do this. I can be the boss. But there were great courses that came with it. I loved the marketing and all that, and the accounting. And so I love the theory, and I love putting theory into practice.
So, now tell me, because mija, that story is really interesting. How the hell did you end up as at the New Jersey Department of State, and now director of the Center for Hispanic Policy Research and Development? Because that's a big jump, Sara. That's not like de aquí a acá. So how did you get there?
By the grace of God. So first and foremost, it's always him in my life that I've put first. I've gone through my struggles. I've gone through it, but I know that it is him that gets me through it. And he's the one that has always pushed me through my difficult times, pushed me and reminded me that I have to keep going. And it was my community, thinking back to my personal experiences, to the people telling my mother at the welfare office, well, lady, you need to speak English. And I would say, no, she doesn't at 8 years old. You know, just the way we were treated differently and looked at differently was just so much for me. So that I lived with that inside. I lived with that. And that, you know, it was anger, but it was my motivation. And so halfway, like I said, about college, I realized, hey, a light bulb went out. No, I have to finish. I have to get my degree. I have to be the first one. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to do it. And I decided to quit 2 of my 3 jobs. And I was already like a supervisor in one of them. I was already managing a hotel. Like it was, I could have left and made, you know, but I was like, no, that's not. I need this paper because this paper, nobody can ever take away from me. And I decided to quit 2 of the 3 jobs and focus more on my education. I moved on campus and my mother didn't talk to me for like 2 or 3 weeks, which was a lot for us because we're very close. And, but I said, you know what? I need to do this for me. And I made that tough decision to go against what my family wanted. And my dad was like always working. So it was very, you know, he was just like, whatever, it's going to improve your life, I'm with you. And that's when I decided I got to get my degree. And as soon as I graduated, it was a lady that was working with me at one of the jobs that I had that was my director. And she said, I want you to open a pain management center for my husband. And immediately when I got that degree, I went and worked in the city with my management degree. And so I was really excited about that because many times we graduate and we don't have jobs, but there was an opportunity. So there was a reason I had worked those 3 jobs to meet these people, to get this, you know, build this network. And now I'm working in the city, making money and opening a practice that today makes, you know, tons of money, has grown. Obviously I've left, but it taught me a lot of lessons when it came to managing, hands-on, managing staff, and seeing the success of the business for these young men, 2 young men that started it, was rewarding for me. We became family. And so I continued in my career and I grew in my career, and then life happens. I got married, things didn't work out. I had a little infant. I was seen in a situation where here's this infant, I'm gonna be a single mother because I decided to end the marriage. And I'm like, oh my God. And here's, you know, we can talk about the relationship and the machismo that comes along in our Latin communities and so forth. But you know what? It was very, very difficult and it was hard, but I did it. I kept going for that little kid. And not only that little kid, but my sister, you know, my nieces who were looking at me.
But let's not forget something, Sara, because of your son and for your son, you started a nonprofit organization. So.
Yes. So as I transitioned through all of that, you know, life and things, I decided in 2014 that I also needed another piece of paper to make more money to provide for my son. Because at that point he was like about 9 or 10. And I went back to school. After 25 years being out, I said, you know what, I need to get a master's. And I got a master's degree from Rutgers University in public administration because I had already done some stuff with nonprofits, volunteering my time to the immigration department at La Casa de Don Pedro. They were the only organization that opened the doors for somebody who wasn't known. I didn't have any political connections. I didn't know anybody. I just picked up the phone one day and said, you know, do you need a volunteer? I want to volunteer in the immigration department. And they said, come on. So anyway, I'm cutting the story a little short, you know, for time, but I got my degree, my master's. And then I said, you know what, during that time, I realized that my son was going to school and not seeing leaders that looked like him. He had a career day and everybody that was there was Caucasian. But he told me, Mom, everybody looks, it was great. It was a good day, you know, and blah, blah, blah. And he said to me, he was about 9 or 10. He said to me, Mom, but nobody looked like me. And I was like, oh, it was like that moment of what? So at that point, I had established some relationships in my community and, you know, was able to say, hey, I have this vision of creating an organization that will expose young men to leaders that look like them so that they can get inspired and we can motivate them. And then we could be the source, the resource for them for whatever they need. And so I had a couple of people say, you know what, I love your vision. Let's do it this way. Let's do this one. I got this. So the network, right? Building a network because at this point, somebody believed in me. And through it all, I was able to start a nonprofit that now is we started in 2013. So now we'll be having our 8th conference this year. We didn't have it last year because of the COVID, but it's a Latino Youth Leadership Conference. And so we've held workshops virtually, we've connected with our students. And so it's really, really important, the great work that we do.
Sara, what's the name of the organization?
It's Boys to Leaders Foundation.
Okay, Boys to Leaders Foundation. So
Mhm.
I'm going to ask you the last question because unfortunately we're out of time. So the last question is, and you understand this probably better than some of us, what advice would you give to a 20-year-old young woman who doesn't know what the future may hold for her?
When you don't know, and I think I shared this before, it's okay. It's okay not to know. You don't have to have it all figured out. It's okay. Take a couple of deep breaths. Sometimes society puts that pressure on us that we need to know what career we're going in. I saw that happen with my son. He's like, Mom, my friends in high school, they already know they want to be a doctor, they want to be a teacher, but I don't know. It's okay. Be okay with that. But one thing I want our young people to know is that each of you matter. Each of you have a unique gift. I don't want to be like Lily. I don't want to be like Michelle. I may want to have those characteristic traits or those leadership traits. And you try to mimic or learn more, or maybe how they stand, or that's okay. But understand that you matter. Don't be afraid to take risk. Stay focused. Set some goals, short term and long term. That helped me. Be determined, but lead by example, because there is always someone watching. And how did I end up to be the director of the Center for Hispanic Policy Research and Development? Was because I'm a woman of integrity. I'm a woman who leads by example. Sometimes I'm wrong. I'll trip and fall, but I'll pick myself up. But I'll take those risks, because without taking those risks, I do not learn. And it was because by God having me at a higher level to make an impact in the Hispanic community in New Jersey now as a whole has truly changed my life. When I was doing it in my community in Newark, because I was doing it, I did it in political campaigns. I spoke up, I advocated. I did it through the Latina organization LUPE that I was a president for 3 years. I've worked with dynamic leaders throughout the state. And now to be the director of Hispanic Affairs, I have to pinch myself sometimes to understand. And I have to look at that gold dome the same way I looked at that City Hall building that I thought I would never enter. As commissioner of the status of women that the mayor has appointed me to for 2 terms already, I am able to walk in there and advocate on the issues that affect women. I am able to walk in those rooms and talk of the issues that affect our youth. And it was why? Because I learned to take those risks. And if I trip and fall, just pick myself up, reflect, and keep going. And maybe there's a different route. The staircase doesn't always go straight. Sometimes you got to take little turns, right? And that's okay.
I think that's an amazing story. And I'm really grateful that you gave me time to actually hear your story, because I think it's really inspiring. And for so many young women who, really at this point feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know if I'm going to go to college. And they hear your story, and to see your trajectory and where you are today, truly an inspiration for other women and other women of color in particular. And that's the part that we want, right? We want to be able to share those stories because we want other women to see that we are ordinary women doing extraordinary things just by living our lives, by giving back, by focusing on what matters, our families, our communities, and just understanding that we serve a much bigger purpose in life, that there is a purpose for each of us. We may not know it right up front, but eventually we get there. We get to that part. So Sara, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in person.
Thank you for having me. I mean, congratulations on doing this project, Marilu. I'm very excited for you. I can't wait to see, the end result, but I'm so happy that you're capturing these stories. And I just want to also kind of say something that you mentioned was living with purpose, and also remember purpose with passion. Live out with your passion. There's always that passion that fuels. And I think that was what fueled me my entire life and continues. I still dream. I still take risks. I still go out there and advocate. I'm still in my community. And I love our people, our Black and brown communities. And that's why I try to make a change every day, because all of you young people are the legacy that we leave behind.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that you all continue doing the work that we've all started for.
Absolutely. We have to pass that baton on. So
Yep.
we absolutely need them to take up the charge as we exit exit that.